Senator Jim Molan, thank you so much indeed for your time. Do you trust this peace deal with the Taliban?
In negotiations for a peace deal, Andrew, at the end of any war, I would trust no one. For years, we worked on the basis of trust but verify. And if you're going to negotiate in any peace deal, you must be in a position of strength. Negotiate from a position of strength. Otherwise, you are fundamentally surrendering. Let's see how this goes. Let's see how much strength America has. Let's see how much strength the new Afghanistan has, which is vastly different from the Afghanistan when the Taliban last took over. And sadly, we will only see that as we go through this and can hardly predict it.
And yet it's not exactly from a position of strength that America is negotiating. After 19 years, the Taliban is still very strong in parts of that country. And Donald Trump has made every sign that is actually bored with this war. So I'm just wondering whether this is an excuse just for Donald Trump to pull out the American soldiers, regardless of what the Taliban then does to Afghanistan.
And that's my concern. We pulled out of Iraq precipitately and had to turn around and go back in. We pulled out of Afghanistan once before and had to turn around, and this is the second lot of going back in. We in Australia even did it in East Timor, and we had to go back in. The peace deal that is on the table, although the Taliban will pay no attention to it at all, the peace deal that's on the table is a 1/3 reduction in American troops. If there's been no significant fighting over 3 months, then over 18 months, the American troops will reduce. Now, President Trump has said we've knocked over the terrorists. Well, yeah, maybe you've hit Islamic State and Al-Qaeda, but the problem at the moment is not so much them, it is the Taliban. And the great tragedy, I think, is not just the 41 Australians who were killed, and I'll never make a judgment on the war overall because that is appalling when people have paid the ultimate sacrifice. The great tragedy is that the Afghanistan that we've built over the last 19 or more years is a different Afghanistan than they last took over back at the end of the Russian period and the 2001-2003 period. Andrew, I think that the fact that so many people now live in the cities, which is not the Taliban's strength, the fact that so many women and children have been educated and have seen an alternative to the Taliban may be different, but sadly only time will tell.
No, you're right. I mean, I've been to Afghanistan twice since the Taliban got knocked over. I haven't been for some time, but even then I could see it was changing, a lot more contact with the outside world, satellite dishes, the whole thing. But the fact that the Taliban is still so strong in parts of the country make me I do wonder, the question you wanted to avoid, that we lost 41 Australians there. Can we be confident the sacrifice was worth it if the Taliban are being dealt into the picture now?
Well, I guess the problem that we face is to put Afghanistan to one side. Our defence strategy over the last 75 years has been to back up our American allies, our great and powerful ally, on the basis that those allies would help us in times of trouble for ourselves. Now, again, this is something that will only work when we know, when we face and see what the trouble is, and will the Americans come and help us? Can they come and help us? I see everything we've done for the last 75 years, Andrew, as a continuum until now. We face the most appalling strategic circumstances, the most unpredictable strategic circumstances in our region that we have faced since the end of the Second World War. And now will be the time to assess whether the sacrifice we've made in a dozen countries, standing behind our great ally for Western ideals, whether that actually delivers something for us or not. I'm more concerned about whether we can rely on our American partners going into the future, not just because whether they want to help us or not, but because of the reduction in their military capability that has occurred since the end of the Cold War. So I will make no judgment on individual wars where we've all made sacrifice, and many have made great sacrifice, from Korea through Malaysia to Vietnam to other areas, Iraq and Afghanistan. Really, has that produced the strategic result that Australia wants, which is security?
Can I just push you finally on that last point with you very personally, because you have gone to war in Iraq, and no doubt the decisions you made as Chief of Operations, coalition men died, maybe Australians died for all I know in that war. Looking back on that, do you think it was worth it, the one in Iraq?
Yeah, I think that the future of Iraq is not yet decided. It won't be like we imagined it to be, but at least Iraq has not gone through what Syria's gone through, Andrew, and that's the point that I revert to as, in my own mind, I justify the sacrifice that the Allies and the Iraqi people have made. Roughly 110,000 people, Iraqis, possibly died. 90% of them killed by our enemies. 4,500 Americans. But in Syria, at the same time, where we did not intervene, 500,000 died, 7 or 8 million were displaced, and many of them are still displaced. The country is destroyed. People who say you should not intervene until you can achieve absolute perfection are stark raving mad. Compared to Syria, we have achieved something in Iraq that at least the Iraqis, as Sunni versus Shia, at least the Iraqis can decide where they're going in the future.
That's an excellent point, because as we now see in the borders with Greece, many of those refugees, they're not from Iraq, they are from Syria, where we did not intervene. Jim Molan, thank you so much indeed for your time.